In continuing my series on the evolution of stone tools, we now arrive at a period that covered around 20,000 to around 15,000 years ago in southern France and the Iberian Peninsula. Now, when I was researching this period, if you do a Google search, most of the links you get is some conspiracy theory, some absolute crap. A hypothesis that the people, the Solutrean people, were the ones that that colonized the Americas. They do that because the tools, the technique they use, the tools are very, very similar. The Clovis points are very similar to these tools that I will show you. We are covering then the Solutrean culture. I will share. We have a bit of a slideshow, and because I couldn't really find much, I found this site. The studies, I have them linked in the description, but the site that I'm going to use is basically a site where you can buy these replicas of these stone tools. I just want to show you what they are, because the technique, and then there's the art, of course, and I will talk about them as we go along. So first of all, we shall share. Now we have here the Solutrean culture, the areas that covered this time zone and this culture. The most important one, we get the name Solutrean from number 12 over here, Solutre. It's in eastern, more or less eastern France, near the Swiss-Italian border, and close to it anyway. And that's where the first tools of this culture was found, so it was named after this place. As you can see, many of the important sites are in Spain and Portugal, and in France as well, near the Bourgogne area, central France, more or less. So let's go on with the tools that we're showing today, and we start off with the Solutrean tools. They are Upper Paleolithic, France, Spain, and Portugal, about 25 to the date here is 20 to 15,000, 25, 21 to 18,000 is also a valid date. So the date here is still okay. There's no, it's around that time, because different areas of are different sites. They sort of they overlap with the next culture that I will talk about afterwards, so that this one evolved, or that came after this one, which is the Magdalenian culture, but that's for another period. So here, this is the site. Is basically describing the tools. These 7 tools, they were found. The original ones were found in southwestern France. They were in the site, collected from the sites of Laugerie, Haute, Les Routes, and Fumel, and they also represent, of course, different techniques. How they were made, I'll show you how they were made. It's a very technique, very precise technique. Here are the main ways that you can produce stone tools. Up until more or less, I talked about the origination not so long ago. Most of the tools were made either by hard punch, which is direct percussion using a hammerstone to hit the core that you want to extract blades from. Then you could also have the soft punch, which is not using stone but using a softer material like bone or wood, or antler. And they allow, because these more malleable materials, the wood, antler, and bone, have some give to them, and they don't, when you hit them, they're not as hard on the material, so they don't crack the core as much, so you can get better flakes out of them. Later on, you can retouch the blades that you make using pressure flakes, and again you use either antler or bone or wood, hardwood, because you can't use softwood, of course, it'll break, but hardwood, and you use them to retouch, shape the core that you like. The technique that from origination times around the 30,000 year mark to later on, 30 around that period, they were using indirect percussion. You have two ways. Indirect percussion is using a hammer and a chisel-like implement, which has either a bone or an antler tip. And after you direct percussion the core to shape it roughly, then you can use that indirect percussion like this to extract really, really clean and precise blades. Another one is using standing pressure, where you hold the core with your feet or some way to hold it, and you use this instrument to extract the blades, which are they can be very, very thin, as I will demonstrate here. These are some of the examples of what we will talk about. This object here in the top top left-hand corner, that is the indirect percussion chisel-like implement. Here it's broken, but that's what it would be. Possibly it's made of possibly hardwood or bone, and you can see some of the examples. So let's get on with that other site. The first ones, you get small laurel leaves. You can see the precision that they were used to make these into there. They're called laurel leaves because they have the shape of a laurel leaf. They were spear points, and they were attached to obviously a shaft, a spear shaft, and they were thrown. Because of their shape, there's speculation, there's a hypothesis that they were designed, especially the bigger ones, which I'll show in a minute, when they were thrown into the large carnivores, to go in between the ribs, so it would penetrate deeper. This one is smaller. It's only about 6.5 centimeters long, and the original one was made by Chert, flint, and quartzite, and obsidian were the materials of choice because they would flake precisely. They didn't shatter when you tried to form them. Their molecular crystalline structure allowed them to be very precise in shaping them. That's why they were, until the invention of metals, the materials of choice. From the smaller ones, you have the larger ones, where basically the same shape, a laurel leaf, an extended laurel leaf. Again, they were hafted onto a spear, for example. But this example, because it was retouched, meaning they blunted one side, and they was possibly used as a knife, because these are super sharp, obviously. So that's another use for these materials. Some other ones, like here, we have these. If you can see, as you can see, this top after where my mouse is traveling. This one, the second one, after the wood, the chisel-like object. This, as you can see, was made with the standing percussion technique. The other ones were then retouched. All of them were retouched, obviously. Pressure flaked and micro and really precise chipping. That's where you get these percussion bulbs that form. These round things in all of them are percussion bulbs. That's where it was hit or pressure flaked, and the flake that was removed as some is in a bulbous shape. So that's where you get this characteristic shape of these tools. This is an example of how big they could have made one. You can see a human hand. This looks like a female hand, a normal female. And these would have been, I have here the original one, or the cast of it. So let's see how long did this one, so you guys can see how impressive they were. Nope. What is it? Oh, it's not here. Never mind. Wait, it's in the site. Let's go back to the site. Continue on to page 2. Here we go. This one is the cast of the one I just showed you. It's 35 centimeters long. So we get a better look here. This this laurel leaf spear point is 35 centimeters long. Yeah. So it's it was used for megafauna, obviously, but there's also speculation that they may, because if one of these blades, if they hit a bone, they shatter because they're so thin. Let me see if I can show you guys how thin they would be. Look, this is the one that was. This is how thin they are. About not even 1 centimeter thick. Most of them are between less than a centimeter to 1.5 centimeters thick. So this particular one would be less than a centimeter thick at its thickest point. So you see how delicate they are. And if they hit it, because they're stone, obviously they're chert or a flint, if you hit a bone, they could shatter easily or get embedded, obviously, and then break. There's a whole lot of reasons, and many of them are not damaged, but some of them are. Some of them there's evidence of them break, of the tips missing, etc. So we know that they were used. But they were designed. There's a speculation. There's a hypothesis that they were designed because of their thinness to go in, trying to get in between the rib cage of, say, the rhinoceros or the woolly mammoth, for example. There's also these that appeared about this time in the archaeological record, sometimes earlier, but maybe the Solutrean period up until now. This one, Magdalenian. No, Magdalenian is next. This is a awl. What is an awl? It's a sewing needle type thing, and a fish hook. These were made of bone. Here's the scale, 1 centimeter. With this sewing implement, we know that they sewed their clothes. So they had, instead of just furs that were tied on, basically, and I mean, like sewing, but instead of actual stitching, there were knots that held sides, etc. In this period of time, they would have sewn them like we sew now. Of course, they would have still made the holes using a point, a stone point, a burin, for example. They would have used this then to sew their clothes, pants, jackets, moccasins, boots, gloves, etc. And the fish hooks, of course, were used fish hooks, and you can see that the shape is exactly the same as modern fish hooks. Now, we get into the art period now. We've talked about the stone tools. The stone tools are innovative in that, going back to how they were made, they were used indirect percussion and indirect percussion and pressure flaking, etc. They were retouched. They were beautiful laurel leaves, blades. You can see that some of them here are actually broken, so from use, etc. So they were restored, obviously. You have some backed blades, you have some scrapers, have some burins, the laurel leaf blades. So these are the ones that the characteristics characterize the Solutrean complex. Then we get on to the arts. At this time of this period, also began to find that the Solutrean people developed bas relief sculptures. So they would chisel away to make relief sculptures, basically. They have horses, bison, aurochs, etc. Aurochs are the ancestor of the modern cattle. And this time period, especially being where it's from, southern Europe, southwestern Europe, France and the Iberian Peninsula. Where do we see this later on? These type of sculptures, this type of technique to make engravings on the walls, etc., or on rock. We'll see them then later on in Göbekli Tepe, the oldest temple on Earth. If you remember when I covered that they found the motifs engraved on stone. That's the technique that may have traveled. This technique was first found in this time period, in the Solutrean period. So this technique was first found in this time period. So we see this here. Then we get the paintings, the famous paintings from Altamira in Spain, from La Chaux in France, etc. And they drew handprint. They did not just stylistic drawings of animals and the handprints and other things, but they also did very realistic drawings. This is from Altamira. It appears to be regional. In the French areas, they did a lot of horses. This one's mixed. 2 ibexes down here, by the way. The bottom stone is showing 2 ibexes. They're like sheep and goats, headbutting themselves, fighting. But they're 2 males. They were fighting. They were rutting. You see a horse over here, another horse, and a bison. In here, this is a French cave. And this can't remember the name of it, but never mind. They drew a lot of horses. In Spain, they drew a lot of bison and aurochs, etc. Well, this here, and that's what we get from the Solutrean period. The techniques that they developed would be continued on, but no, they were basically because the next period that I will talk about, and that's the development after this one, there was a huge change because around the 18,000 year mark was the height of the last glacial period. The glaciers were at their maximum up until this period. After 18,000, 15,000 years ago, the weather, we started leaving the glacial maximum and entering an interstadial, which we are still in. There isn't as much ice as there was at this period of time. We are still in an ice age, people. There is still ice on Earth. To get out of an ice age, there cannot be any ice on Earth. So that happened about 50 million years ago when there was no ice even in the poles. And I'm talking about the Northern Pole and Antarctica. And that's a bit of what climate change is all about. It's happening. It's real. And I want to enjoy the weather, the climate that the dinosaurs had. So bit of a joke. But yeah, that wraps it up. The Solutrean, just to summarize, the Solutrean developed these beautiful, really thin laurel leaf type points that were artistic masterpieces, and the work that needed to be done. They were very efficient hunters, the Solutrean people. The culture, they were innovative in sewing, and they continued innovating in art. And then there's also the conspiracy theories that they colonized the Americas, which is wrong. It's been found that DNA that they have absolutely nothing to do with these people. They came from Siberia, etc., etc. So, people, I ended here. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a short one as well because we're wrapping up soon. We just have 2 more developments: the Magdalenian and then the Neolithic. So I ended here, and thank you all for coming along.